Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. And happy last day of 2025. If you're here, let me know you're here. If you don't see this till afterwards, hit hashtag replay in the comments. Drop a comment, ask a question, whatever. If you are just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna. I am a mom, a nana, a girlfriend, a grad school student studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling, part-time program director for my local affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and a runner, a jazzerciser when I'm not trying to recover from the crud. I could really use a run right now, but it's not happening just yet. If you have been following me for a while, then you know that I took last week off to be present with my grandkids, and I thought for a fleeting second that I was going to be off again this week. I have been battling the crud, as many are right now. I have a lot of friends, a lot of Facebook friends, family that are sick in some form or fashion. I even have at least one friend that is in the hospital right now. So that makes it a little easier for me to resist that urge to nap when I think, no matter how bad I think I feel, I don't feel that bad. So the last couple of days, so hopefully it's not going to cut me out too much. So if you are battling the crud, I hope that you get through it and over it quickly, and completely. And I will apologize ahead of time if I have to take a coughing break, because that's my biggest issue that still remains right now. In any case, if you have been following me for a while, you know that besides the break I took last week, prior to that, I did a video on about traditions and when they're not on schedule and when they are sometimes maybe more of a shackle for us than something to be enjoyed, and when it's okay, why it's okay to be flexible with our traditions, especially in this day and age. Good morning, Miss Patricia. So in between all of that, actually probably before the traditions episode, if I remember correctly. And again, I'm still recovering from being sick, so my brain's moving a little slow. So if I'm not my normal peppy self this morning, that's why. But actually, just a little bit before that, I saw something. I had an appointment with somebody, and I can't go into a lot of details about that, but there was something in their office that really stuck with me. And that is what kind of started today's episode topic for me. And I think it's a great way to wrap up the new year. So I want to talk about the whiteboard. In my graphic that I posted to kind of tell you what I was going to be talking about this week. I mentioned the whiteboard, and that's just kind of the name of it. So I had this appointment with this person who is really making things happen in my area. But really quietly and kind of behind the scenes. If you're not part of what's going on, if you're not part of that program, you might not ever know that it exists, which I find is the case with a lot of things. In any case, I had a meeting with this individual, and there were several interruptions while I was meeting with them, as was expected. So I had time, a couple of different times, to sit in their office and just kind of look around and take in what I saw. And in this office, every wall just about was covered with either personal items or notes from people that they had helped, some type of decoration. There were pictures, there were reminders of the impact that they had had. There were just a lot of different interesting things all over the walls. And I just wasn't kind of... But then there was one thing that I noticed, and it was this whiteboard. In the middle of all of this was this whiteboard that was completely blank. It was a dry erase board. That's what I mean when I say whiteboard. And it was just completely blank. It had pens there. It was ready to go. So every piece of these walls in this office were covered with some type of memorabilia, personal, like I said, proof of impact, notes, pictures, stories. But in the middle of all of it was this white dry erase board. Not big, but completely blank, completely clean. Not a single thing on it except for little magnetic markers at the bottom. And I found myself coming back to that dry erase board. And I don't know, for those who know me, it may have been just driving me a little bit. It may have just been bugging me a little bit because it was so clean. But I had to wonder, was it forgotten? Was it finished for the day? Did it start with a list of things to do that had been gradually erased off? Or was it left intentionally empty? Because it was, like I said, the walls weren't cluttered. It was tastefully done, with a lot of memorabilia, but there was this one blank space, and I had to wonder if it was left blank intentionally. So that really stayed with me, and I found myself going back to it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And while I was there, I considered asking about it, with some kind of a comment like, hey, looks like you got your list of things done for the day, something passive aggressive to try to get information. But I never really got the chance, and it never really felt right to ask the question. And I also nearly wrote on it a couple of different times when that person was out of the office, handling something, something uplifting that would let them know that learning about them was impactful to me. Learning about them and their program was impactful to me. And I didn't do that either. I wanted to, but this strange blank white space in the middle of everything just was kind of almost intimidating. Like I wanted to write something on it, but at the same time I didn't. I didn't want to kind of mess up that blank space, if that makes sense. So like I said, it stuck with me. I thought about it for several days, especially since it's the end of the year, because I feel like it's important here. So I found myself wondering, as I was mulling this over, I found myself wondering what or who that space was for, what might have been written there that was erased off, what hadn't been written yet, what could be written there. And I thought about it for a couple of days. And I started wondering about my own empty space. Like, do I have any? Should I have some? And if I do, what should I do with it? So how does this tie into the end of the year? Well, our lives a lot of times look like those walls I saw, right? But not always. Sometimes our spaces are full of calendars and bulletin boards and dry erase boards and roles and expectations. Hopefully, but not always, they're also full of proof of what we've accomplished and reminders of what we mean to others or what others mean to us. We have this huge wall here at home that we started turning into the picture wall. It was just this giant blank space before, and it still has a lot of open space on it. Why does it still have a lot of open space on it? Well, because it's not done yet, because we always want there to be room for new pictures, new family members, adding family members that aren't on there yet. Friends, we have friends on the wall. So it's like the wall of fame now. That's what I call it in the house, our picture wall. And we have a lot on it, but there's still a lot of blank space left on the wall. So we're very good at filling space, and hopefully it's with more meaningful things than it is busy things. But do we leave any space open? And do we do that on purpose? Or do we fill everything so that nothing looks unfinished? It's kind of metaphorical for me. When we leave blank space open, is it on purpose? Is it because it's unfinished? When my boyfriend and I look at our picture wall, do we feel like it's unfinished? I don't feel, and I had to think operating today. I don't really feel like it's unfinished when I look at it. I do look at it and go, who's not on here that should be? Or what picture we need to add to this that was just taken recently? But I don't ever feel like the wall is unfinished, as I feel like it's got room for growth. But not everybody feels that way. Some people fill everything so that nothing looks unfinished. We don't always like blank spaces, and I can be the same way. Obviously, when I had this struggle over this dry erase board in the middle of this wall that I wanted to ask about or write on, obviously blank space is an issue for me too, right? So do we leave any space open? Do we do that on purpose, or do we do it accidentally? Or do we fill everything so that nothing looks unfinished? And if that's the case, does that blank space haunt us, kind of like this dry erase board haunted me? Does it haunt us with an invisible list of what needs to be done? Or does it make us smile, like my picture wall, at the thought of the possibilities that there are and the room for possibilities that there is? So what if blank doesn't mean empty? A lot of times we view blank space, and again, metaphorically speaking, it doesn't have to be a legitimate space on the wall or dry erase board, but do we view it as being behind? Do we view it as wasted space? Do we view that blank space as something unfinished or as a failure? And I think a lot of times we do, because we are so, in today's culture, we are so focused on busyness and filling every single space, that we feel like if it's not filled, if it's not finished, that somehow it's a failure or we are a failure. And what if it means that it's not empty? What if it actually means that it's open and that there's room for more, that there's room for growth, like on my wall? Why did I look at this dry erase board in this office so differently than I look at the space on my picture wall? Like the space on my picture wall full of possibilities, but this space on this dry erase board could have been full of possibilities. And I actually wondered if it wasn't left there empty intentionally so that people could write on it. And I still resisted the urge. But in that office, I found that empty blank space intimidating. In my picture wall that has room for growth, I don't want to say unfinished because it doesn't feel unfinished. It feels like it has room for growth. So what if blank doesn't mean empty? What if it means that there's an opening, or that there's room for more, or that there's room for growth? What if it means that not everything that's unfinished is a failure? Or that some things we leave intentionally open, we intentionally leave space for change, for growth, for additions, whatever. Space allows for reflection. Space allows for rest. It allows for change. And it allows for new ideas and growth. Sometimes it just allows for room to breathe. And I can totally understand that to my core, because in my busy world, sometimes having a blank space somewhere in the day or in the week is literally like a breath of fresh air, and something that makes me excited, because I'm not operating on this rigid self-imposed schedule or somebody else's imposed schedule. We often feel pressure to account for how we've spent most of our time, especially as we wrap up one year and we are getting ready to roll into a whole new one. We feel pressure, and I've felt that before too, to account for how we've spent our time in this year, to justify where we're at or where we aren't, and to prove that we've made progress in some way, whatever that means. And we don't like blank spots because we are uncomfortable with space that doesn't have an explanation. And as I say that out loud, like I had that in my notes, but as I say that out loud, I realized that was the bottom line with this blank space in this very well put together office. This blank space made me uncomfortable because it didn't have an explanation. And I was reaching internally for an explanation as to why the space was blank. And that's why I kept asking all those questions. So a little epiphany here for me today as I'm talking to you about it. So we don't like blank spots because we are uncomfortable with space that doesn't have an explanation. And trust me, I understand this. I'm a time blocker, and it took my mentor a long time to get me to understand time blocking to the point where I could make it work for me. And for the most part, it is very, very good for me, and it keeps me on track. However, sometimes it's overwhelming. Sometimes having every spot in the day filled up with something and not feeling comfortable. So when I look at my planner and I see blank space that I haven't filled up, I'm like, what am I forgetting? But at the same time, when I look at my planner and it's full, chock full every minute of every day, I'm like, where's the room to rest? And so that same mentor taught me, when they were teaching me time blocking, to leave a buffer. And that was huge for me. And they also taught me that I didn't have to plan out the whole week at once, that I could just put down the non-negotiables and then work on it one day at a time. And that's when things finally started to click for me in terms of time blocking, because I was struggling with filling all that blank space. And I was overwhelmed by the prospect of all that blank space being filled, because there was no room. So when she started talking about leaving buffers, I was like, oh, so like you leave yourself a half hour of padding on either side of that hour you just blocked off to allow for unexpected changes, to allow for a little breathing room, to allow for anything that might fit into that blank space, even if it's nothing. In fact, sometimes I block my time so much that sometimes when I look at the calendar, we have a dry erase calendar on our wall too, where we kind of put all of the appointments that affect all of us. I sometimes look at it, and when I see that we have a weekend that's got nothing on it, and it's been a while because we've had something every weekend, I will, in big red letters with my red dry erase marker, I will go in and write no on those days because I don't want to leave them blank, because then I'm afraid that they will get filled. Isn't that funny how that works? And so I will write no, which basically means I need this time. Don't schedule anything. I don't want to do anything here. I want to leave this time open, but yet I'm still filling it with something because I'm not comfortable with the blank space. So that's kind of why this was so important for today, because as we wrap up 2025, and this is going to be a brief one today, for obvious reasons, I'm not feeling 100%. But there's not a lot to say about it, okay? Other than the one that I've learned, and if you can get something out of that, but something to think about and something to reflect on as you move from 2025 into 2026. Are we justifying the blank spaces, or are we embracing them and smiling at their existence? Ultimately, in the reflection that I did on this whiteboard, including this little epiphany that I just had while I was talking to you, I think the blank space is good. Even though it was intimidating at first, I'm learning that it's good. And I've learned about myself this week that I look at different blank spaces differently. And I'm not sure that I always did. I think I always found blank space intimidating. So the fact that I don't look at our picture wall the same way means that there's growth there, which is ironic because there's lots of room for growth there. So with that said, are we justifying the blank spaces, or are we embracing them and smiling at their existence as we're reflecting on 2025? Do we feel the need to justify every single blank space that we didn't have anything going on? Or do we feel the need to fill it? Or are we looking at all the space that was filled and there were no blank spaces and asking ourselves why we didn't make time to rest and breathe? So these are all important things to think about because they're going to impact how we go forward into 2026. So my invitation to you as you reflect on the year, because we all do it. It may not be today. It may be tomorrow. It may be next week when we all of a sudden realize, oh my gosh, it's a whole new year. What am I doing? You may have been reflecting already for this whole last month or two. But where are you filling every inch of your life? And where is it okay to leave something open? That's my question for you today. You don't have to answer me. If you want to, you can. I absolutely encourage you to shoot me a message, drop a comment, whatever. But are you leaving space for change? Are you leaving space for grace? Or for a new version of you? Are you leaving space for any of those things? Because I've come to the conclusion that that's really important, that we leave that blank space open, because we never know when we might need it to change something, to find grace for ourselves, to get input from someone else, or to grow and become a new version of ourselves. So as you reflect on 2025 and as you prepare for 2026, maybe, just maybe, what you filled up, the space you filled up, wasn't as important as what you left open. Some things aren't meant to be filled just yet. So my question to you would be, what can you leave open in 2026 to make room for breathing, for growing? That's all I've got. That's all I've got. I just, it tempts me a little bit to put a whiteboard somewhere that I refuse to write on in case somebody else wants to write on it. But the truth is that we have a whole year of whiteboard coming up. And we can choose how we fill it. And although I'm a huge fan of time blocking and I'm a huge fan of feeling productive, I understand now more than ever that sometimes in order to do that, I need to have that breathing room. So are you going to leave space open this year? And what's that going to look like? Is it going to be a dry erase board that's blank, that's ready for somebody to write on in the middle of neatly decorated and nicely filled, aesthetically filled walls? Or is it going to look like something else? That's all I've got today. I hope that made sense. I hope that you found it helpful and that maybe you got something out of it. Most of all, I just hope that it gives you pause. It gives you something to think about. It gives you pause to think, and maybe approach your next year a little bit differently, and leave a little space to grow. All right. If you found this helpful, as you know, I encourage you to share it. I encourage you, it's on YouTube. All my videos are on YouTube now. I usually have the new one uploaded within an hour of when I finish. I know that was brief. Like I said, I'm just happy to feel well enough to be on here today. So we'll just go with that. And however you're celebrating today, however you're reflecting, whatever today, the last day of 2025 looks like for you, I hope it's happy and I hope it's safe. And I look forward to seeing you in 2026, which will be the next time I see you. In the meantime, be well and Happy New Year.